Welcome back to the next segment of our interview with Richard Wolff. He's an economist that teaches at the New School. We're in New York City, and we are talking about the American auto industry. Thanks for joining us, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
So the new president of General Motors, when asked on Meet the Press, and we'll play that clip again. We used it, and here it is again.
It was said years ago that what's good for GM is good for America and vice versa. Is that still the case today, and what is the GM of the future?
GM in the future is a couple of things. One, it's a globally competitive company. It's a company that wins in the major markets. It's a company that grows in emerging markets. It's a company focused around products, fantastic products, and consumers. In terms of what we have to do to be successful, David, we need to take the tough actions to restructure our business. But it's all about capturing the imagination of consumers with great cars and trucks, fantastic styling, winning the consumer back.
So the saving of the American auto industry is going to be more stylish cars. Seems to me we've
heard that before.
Heard that before. Stylish cars, maybe with a battery. But now that you have government and union more or less control of the companies, doesn't this mean there's something new happening here?
Doesn't look like it. Looks like they're going to rely, and may have to rely, on basically the same old management structure, the same old logic of what the management does. They're going to try to make competitive cars. Maybe people are imagining that Toyota will sit by and simply watch. That's not the case. There is too much capacity for cars already in the world. We have more capacity to produce cars than anyone reasonably thinks we could sell under the best of circumstances, let alone in a crisis. China and India are now beginning to roll out the new production of cars that they have developed the capacity.
Electric cars.
Electric as well as gas-fired. We have a situation in which there needs to be a whole-scale rethinking of transportation, because if everybody continues to try to make a living producing cars, it's a disaster that simply will continue, and more bailouts. It's an unthinking attempt to get back to where we were a few years ago, but that was the problem. That was a situation that was bound to fail. It has now failed. It's not smart to go back and pretend we can do it the second time after we failed the first.
The model seems to be based, especially the equity that's given to the union, on the idea that someday these shares are going to be worth something, so you're going to be able to fund your health care plan, because someday, I guess in principle what happens, you sell these shares back to private hands again, and all this equity UAW is going to have is turned back, and somebody comes in and buys out UAW share, and we wind back in the same model we were in before.
Right.
So what's the alternative to that?
The alternative is to say that this is a national problem. It affects everybody in our economy, which it does. We all depend on energy, we all depend on transportation, and the auto workers have for 100 years almost in this country now been trendsetters for levels of wages and levels of benefits. If we crush these workers, if we take a step that makes their health care dependent on a stock market gamble, we are setting the pace for a United States that's going to have more, not fewer, economic problems. I think much of this has to do with leaving the decisions in the hands of the board of directors and the few major shareholders. They've been the ones making the key decisions in the auto industry for the last 40 years. They've proven themselves, in the case of GM, Chrysler, and Ford, to have done a really poor job of that, even though they were challenged in many ways. To leave it in their hands, not to make a radical change in how these decisions are made, seems to me a very big mistake.
So what's a radical change? You're talking about nationalization?
Yeah, I think that we need to understand that if we say something is too important to let it die, too big to fail, whether it be a big banking system or our automobile system, then we're saying it is so important for the society as a whole that we can't let it go. But if it's that important, it should never have been in private hands in the first place. What are we doing allowing a small group of people interested in high salaries for management and high prices for stocks make decisions that the whole society depends on? If you're too big to fail, you're too big to be a private thing, you have to be something that the society as a whole undertakes. And if we did that, we'd have a chance, because the society as a whole might really want to move from the private automobile to mass green transportation. If the society as a whole were making the decisions, they could integrate what is done in the auto industry with all the the other parts of a comprehensive change. That would make sense. What we're doing now doesn't.
What do you make of the argument from the other side by being sort of the free market purists who say, let this stuff crash and burn, let the bondholders lose their investment, let the workers, this is what happens in capitalism and free markets, people get laid off and lose their jobs. New companies will emerge to make cars and they'll hire these people back at some point, and you'll have debt-free new companies and perhaps more innovative. What's wrong with that argument?
What's wrong with that argument is it pretends that we are not a system. It pretends that you can let the auto companies die or the banks die without having to worry about all of the ways automobiles and banks are tied into everything else. That's wishful thinking, but it's not true. They are too big to fail. Let me give you two examples. The bondholders who had lent money to the car companies, they weren't stupid. When they bought the bonds of the car companies, they insured themselves. Just in case the car companies couldn't pay back, they went and got something called a credit default swap. That's a contract that basically insures you if the person or the company you've lent money to doesn't pay you back, you have an insurance policy. Okay, who has to make good on that insurance policy? All the big banks in America and all the insurance companies led by AIG that wrote all those credit default swaps. If we let the car companies go, all those bondholders are going to be ruined. They're going to turn to all the other banks and insurance companies that wrote those insurance policies, but they don't have the money. So what's going to happen now? Is the government going to have to bail out another $1 trillion in this sort of...
Well, the argument that's coming from some of the kind of more libertarian economists is let them all burn, let them all go down, and let new things emerge, and there'll be chaos for a while, and then there'll be something new.
Right. You know, a famous British economist named John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, you know, we all die. It's the short run that matters. If we have chaos in the United States economy, which is the leading economy still in the world, which is the rest of the world depends on selling their goods here, if we have chaos, they will have chaos, and we have an unknown situation, the outcome of which could be very bad, and even if it were good, could take a very long time, during which the political toleration of masses of people for this disaster will show itself in very extreme forms. We actually have a vision of that already. It's our southern neighbor, Mexico. It is a society that is in free fall right now. It is suffering not just swine flu, but a disaster as immigrants come back home because there's no more work here, and the remittances that kept their economy going can't be sent back because the workers have no job. And this is a society on our border that is falling apart. That's not a tolerable situation. We have now major warfare in Mexico between drug gangs and police in a situation that everybody who knows anything understands is a society that's disintegrated.
So this kind of let it burn is one step away from Mad Max territory.
That's right. It's a very strange argument. What it does is it understandably says we're very frustrated and angry at these big banks and these big executives. They shouldn't be able to get away with this. They shouldn't get a bailout that keeps them in their fancy mansions and their powerful positions. All of that I agree with. But the inference that therefore let them die misunderstands an economic system whose parts are dependent on each other. That's a luxury we can't afford. It doesn't mean we have to leave them in there, but it means we have to respect the linkages that we have and have a comprehensive plan, and that can only be done by the society as a whole through its government. It can't be done by individual profit-seeking corporations who are each covering their own situation at whatever social expense.
Okay, so in the next segment of the interview, let's flesh out what you think the plan might look like. Okay. Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Richard Wolff. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households We're receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have a $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.